Hi, welcome to the Best of Mt Shasta. It's wonderful to have you here with us today, and I'm so excited about this interview. It's been a long time coming, and we are going to have a descendant tribal member of both the Shasta and Karuk tribe talking with us today, Frederick Schantz. And without further ado, I know we were looking at some language and wordage on the titles. And please, Fred, explain a little bit of that to us and then take us on into what you would like to talk about today.
Well, thank you, Andrée. I appreciate the opportunity to talk on this program. Like I said, we've been over a year in the making of bringing this series together. The words that are behind you are about the Shasta people. WEKA, NUNEE, TUCKEE, WACKEE is a Shasta Indian expression which means to be walked around but never on top. Because the Shasta people believe that WEKA, the god WEKA, lived on the top of Mount Shasta, and that if people went to visit, they would have to stay around the base of it and clean up the base as they left, but never to dishonor their god, if you will, WEKA. Now, the Shasta people themselves are referred to as KUTI, KANAC, and of course there's a lot of information on the internet if you want to look up more about Shasta people in more detail, because there are some varying stories about how the Shasta people got their modern name. Alfred Kroeber, R.E. Dixon, and a couple of others did a lot of research to find out that the Shasta name actually came from a old gentleman that lived, actually a chief that lived at the base of Mount Shasta in Edgewood. His name was Shasteka. And our family proudly traces our roots back to Shasteka and his wife Blaze. That was some years ago. Now I wanted to show you a picture of a traditional costume, or I should say outfit, worn by a Shasta person. This gentleman's name is Sergeant Sambo, as he's been called. He was one of the main informants for giving the people writing stories about the Shasta information. Just a wonderful man that I had the pleasure of not talking to, but certainly hearing about.
If you'd like, we could start with your, because you did mention your relationship with Shasteka, and I think it would be very interesting if we could hear about your genealogy and the story of your family and 6 generations back.
Okay, yes, I'll do that. Our family is very multicultural. We have some Indian, of course, English, German, Irish bloods in our system. Number of families that came together in Siskiyou County. My grandfather's great-grandfather, Josiah Jordan, married an Indian woman. Her name was Kate. Of course, she had an Indian name, but we didn't have many records about the naming then at that time. And Kate was the daughter of Shasteka and Blaze. She also had a sister named Julie, but again, it's a lot of historical information. So Josiah Jordan actually saved the life of Blaze and her sister, and actually Canyon married her aunt, when they were trying to run away from people that were trying to harm them during very difficult times in the early mid-1800s. So actually Blaze, so I should say Kate, ran into Josiah Jordan's house in the South Fork of the Salmon River, and after a period of time they got married and had a number of children. Actually they had 8 girls and 2 boys. One of the daughters was named Rosa, and Rosa married grandfather's grandfather, William, they call him Willie Wolford. So the Wolfords became part of our family as well. And after some time, Rosa and grandfather Wolford had Frederick, my grandfather, and of course I was named after him through my mother, Alice, who was, of course, his daughter. That's how kind of I got here.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
So on that chart, we see the first generation, Shasteka and Blaze.
Yes, the chart shows that's a good chart there. First generation, I'm actually 6th generation Shasta Karuk descendant tribal member. Shasteka and Blaze, and second then Kate and Josiah, Rosa and Willie, and grandfather Frederick and Mama Alice, and then I came along. I actually have my email address was fredsch6@gmail.com, but somebody hacked me, so my email now is fred222@gmail.com. Anyhow.
When you were talking about the your lineage, you mentioned the multicultural family that you were exposed to, and that obviously created different beliefs in God through the generations. Today on the show, we're going to spend a lot of time in terms of your own spiritual awakening, and I'd like to hear sort of starting from your how it was growing up, and then how it was your spirituality changed and became universal due to your connections with the Shasta tribe. If you would talk about that.
Yes, and that's the main theme of this meeting, actually, of this interview, is to talk about spirituality and my own personal journey, and hopefully sharing it will have some meaning to some people that we'll be sharing this video with. My family is, again, multicultural. Grandma was a Methodist, and I spent a lot of time in the Methodist church, and Dad was Catholic, and he was not a very good Catholic, and Mom was Jehovah's Witness. She was a very good Jehovah's Witness. Great-grandma was Church of Christ, and my great-aunt was a Christian Scientist. So as a kid, I was going around from one church to another, listening to how they didn't like the other church or how the other one was wrong, and I'm thinking, they all have the same thing in mind, and that's God. They're people looking for a way for God. And culturally, all cultures have some sort of explanation for the universe, how we got here and where we're going. It's very important for children for that understanding. So as I grew up and got older, I thought, I just didn't really buy into a whole lot of the dogma, if you will, that all of the different religions had. They all had their own set of dogma, unfortunately damning each other periodically. So I just kind of pondered about this for some time until I went to San Luis Obispo, went to school down there, taught there for a while, had really a wonderful 3 years in San Luis Obispo. And I met a spiritual person. His name was Semu Huaute. He was the spiritual leader of a intertribal group of recovering alcoholics and drug addicts, intertribal Indian group. And he came to that area in order to buy land and settle down and work with the rehab program, which I became very much a part of. And one day, after talking to Semu about a number of things, I walked over to a table where he was sitting, and there on the table were two masks, that had been carved, and one mask had a frowny face, the other mask had a smiley face. And I looked at him, I said, "Boy, these are really interesting." And Semu says, "Yes, you need to understand that when you make a mask, it captures a spirit. And some spirits are good and some spirits are not so good. So you can be very careful of how you handle them." And I said, "Oh yeah, sure." So I picked up the mask with the frown on it. And I'm standing there holding the mask with my right hand, looking at Semu and talking to him. On my left hand, I felt something land on my finger. And I just instinctively, instead of flipping it off, I rubbed it. It stung me so bad, I took a step or two back, looked down, there was a large yellow jacket or a hornet that had just stung the heck out of me. And just before that happened, when I picked up that mask, there were several tribal members standing around, talking and stuff. They started backing up when I picked up the mask.
You mean like backing away?
They started backing away from both of us talking. And when when the hornet stung me, and I was sitting shaking my hand, grandfather just looked at me and smiled. And I could hear a sigh of relief from everyone around me. You just experienced the power of grandfather. At that moment, it was really strange, and it was an emotional experience for me. I realized, the connection to the universe, and to animals, if you will, insects, the power of a shaman that grandfather was. And I felt enlightened. I just felt, wow. I am connected. He has shown me in his own way that there is, you know, a universe and a universal connection between all things, and one must be careful of how you deal with such a condition. So that I consider, again, my spiritual awakening. I had a second experience several years later with the spiritual leader of the Shasta tribe at a powwow in Medford, Oregon. And I went up and attended this powwow and met the spiritual leader, who was just such a wonderful man. And we sat down, we talked about a number of things. He was a personal friend of Sergeant Samuel, who I showed you the picture of earlier, who had given him this headdress, you know, of that costume, and he was making another one for me, actually. We had a long discussion about a number of things. And little did I know at that point that I would be soon coming back to him and asking him about an experience, a very emotional experience that I had after that meeting, actually, at a powwow at the powwow in Medford. I went to a powwow there with a girlfriend, and we had a barbecue, and it was just a wonderful event. In the evening, of course, the fire came and the drums came on, and a number of competing clans were mounting around the fire, the open fire, of women groups as well. And one group started coming around the fireplace, and they had full costumes of grizzly bears on them. They'd actually had gutted the bear and put the entire costume, so even the bear's head was in front of theirs. And they were making noises and grunting, much like a grizzly bear would do. And boy, I found this so fascinating. And as they came close to me, and again, excuse me if I get emotional when I relive this experience, but as they came close to me, I got nauseous. I got dizzy. I thought I was going to pass out. I didn't know what was happening. So I told my girlfriend, help me up. I mean, I was just fatigued, and started walking back towards the car. And as we walked back, I was just so overwhelmed that I literally fell down on my knees. I couldn't walk anymore. I thought I was going to die. The feeling was unbelievable. And two of the fellows that were nearby there came over and helped me up, and I was just almost had to drag me to the car a distance away, and it finally got me in the car. And I cried for several minutes, not knowing why I felt this way. It made no sense to me. So I went back a few days later to see the spiritual leader, and I explained it to him. He said, "Oh my gosh." He said, "You don't understand." He said, "Shasta people never attend a Bear Clan event because it's toxic to Shasta people's spirits." And I thought, he said, "That's why you felt that way, and you were lucky to get away from there before you died, because Shasta people have in the past." And I thought, well, that's a good explanation for it. And 2 days later, I got a call from one of my friends who was sitting next to me during the powwow and during this Bear Clan ceremony, who died on his way home. Again, it was an experience that was very difficult to comprehend and to understand. So,
it's not to sort of break into this, but you also spent some time with that person that gave you a lot of knowledge, and there's a story that you told me about with your son, and I'd like you to go into that, if you will, at this time.
Yes, during my time in San Luis Obispo and Santa Margarita, working with SEMU and the tribal, the Red Wind Foundation that was getting established there, SEMU asked me one day, he said, "Why don't you come up for a ceremony next weekend, and we're going to have a ceremony. I'd like to invite your whole family up." So we went up there, and that evening, and we had a barbecue, and the fireplace was going, and SEMU came over to me, and he handed me 2 medicine pouches. And one of the medicine pouches was for my son Edward, and the other one was for my daughter Leslie, and gave them sacred names at that point. name my children. As the condition would have it, Samu needed to raise a little more money, so he contacted some friends of his that he was the spiritual leader for as well, and that was the Eagles Band and Neil Young and also Linda Ronstadt. Well, Neil Young and the Eagles showed up, and he named Neil Young's son at the same time. Linda Ronstadt couldn't come; she had laryngitis, so didn't show up. But that was an astonishing experience. The amazing thing about that experience, among other things, was that when our Edward was born, I named him Edward Kip, or we did, Edward Kip, because Kip is a Shasta word for sacred mountain. Grandfather, when he gave me the pouch for Edward, he said, your son's name, Indian name, is Yenkwehe, which means the sacred mountain. And I thought, just the universe came in on me. How could this possibly be, when the same naming came, from two different sources of the spirit of our son, who was just a delightful person all of our lives.
The reason I'm pausing is when I hear these stories, and I've actually heard this a couple of times before, is I recognize something that I've always sort of felt about the Native people in our country, is how connected they are to both the earth and the universe at the same time. And a lot of times when people think of spirituality or things of that nature, it's we've been introduced to other traditions from other countries. But I think it's important for people to hear about how it is you view your own experiences. And I really thank you for being so honest and open and forthright and telling us what you've been experiencing. But when I first met you, what was interesting is that you're an academician, you're a professor, and you've traveled all over the world to 41 countries, and you were in the Peace Corps, and you've had many amazing experiences there as well. And you wrote a book about those experiences, and there was one story in there that I thought would be of interest to the audience that took place in Cairo. And would you like to talk about that experience?
Yes, I would. If I had more time, I would talk about the other 29 stories as well. The thing that amazed me so much in traveling in different countries, actually I started out in the Peace Corps, and I wanted to work in poor countries, and I did that for over 20 years. But every place we went, there were really unusual experiences. But the amazing thing is, the spirit was there. I lived with it. I felt it, that the universe was there to comfort and protect us. So we never worried about anything in that sense. We always knew that we would be safe. Well, in this book, there are example after example of conditions where, very serious situations, a couple of near-death experiences as well. But it always worked out that we came through it. One experience in Cairo was, we'd been there like 4 years. It was time to come home in the summertime. The project was over. So I went down to the TWA office and bought a ticket for TWA 825, whatever, the 15th of June, 1985. And several friends of ours said, well, take our kids with you as well. So I had 5 kids, my own 3 and Sandy, and we all got on the airplane. We're all going to go get on the airplane together. Well, 2 weeks before the plane was due to fly, I thought, I need to change the tickets. And it was a condition where I've had so many times in my life where intuition, from the spirit came into me. And grandfather always said, follow your intuition, because that's the only truth that you have, because it's your connection with the universe and with safety and with the reality of living. So I went down and changed all the tickets and postponed them So instead of going from Cairo to Rome to Athens, Rome, New York City, and San Francisco, which we always did the last 3 years before that, the tickets went from Athens to, I don't know, Salt Lake to Texas, Salt Lake City. So it took us an hour or two longer to get there. And everyone was so mad at me. We went and got on the plane in Cairo, and they said, "What'd you do that for? We got to take the longest." I said, "I don't know, but I knew I was told I needed to do that." So I changed those tickets. We got to Athens, got off the plane to catch the next plane on to Rome. It was TWA 835, and we were in the airport, and it filled up with people. No planes were flying, and all of a sudden, terrorists. The word came around to everyone. There I was with 9 people, at a tour guide with all these kids, and they froze the planes there. But that plane went from Athens, went on not to Rome, but to Beirut, first hijacking. And they all looked at me and said, "Whoa." Of course, they killed one guy, dropped him on the pavement there in Beirut, and a whole bunch of other stories subsequently to that I experienced during the 80s and 90s when I worked a lot in foreign countries. But at the end of it, when we finally got home, our parents said, "We didn't hear it. We didn't know where you guys were. We thought you were in Beirut." And everybody was so relieved that the Spirit had indeed protected us.
Well, and going back to this, circling back to your experience with your son, when he passed away, he received that name, and yet he passed away at an early time in his life, and you felt that the universe had need for him. And just the perspective and the knowingness that you had at that time of how it was okay in a sense, even though you lost your son.
That's true. It's a very difficult subject for me, but I need to talk about it. He was the spiritual part of our family, just an unusual young man, a talented artist, just amazing young man. And when he was 24 years and just finished college, got engaged, had a job that he'd always wanted. His girlfriend rolled her car on the freeway, so he rushed out there to find out and to help her. And on the way, he got ran over and died on the freeway. Any of you that have lost children know what that means. I wanted to go with him. I had no reason to live. And fortunately, my strong belief in the universe and asking it to comfort me in some way, what came to me was he was needed somewhere else to do what he did for us. So we thank the universe for the time he was here and have learned to live without him. But I have 2 wonderful daughters, and my wife has since passed, of course, since then. So we look forward to not what we've lost, but what we have, and knowing that one day we'll be together again in the spiritual world. We believe that very strongly. And we're here, we're all connected spiritually. Our bodies are just kind of other things, but I know everybody has a different belief in that aspect. But certainly, if you let the Spirit work for you, the universe is there to comfort you.
And that goes into your writing. You've written many books, and you'll have at the end of this interview, there will be the credits that will have the contact information. So you'll have that. But you're writing a new book about the Shasta people, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it took me 10 years to write the first book, and that's has about 30 stories of travels in foreign countries. So I'm hoping in 10 months to get the second book written. Actually, I've written probably 3 dozen articles and essays for different things. This is only my first book of full publication.
How can people access the essays and the other articles? Are they available?
Yes, they are. Several stories that I've written in addition to what's on here, and some of the ones that I've mentioned. If you send me an email, I'd be glad to give you that information where you can copy and read some of them. It's a pleasure to do that. But my new book's going to be called Chief Shasteka and Blaze, The Legend Lives On. what's amazing about my youngest daughter is she's a nationally known empath now. Sandy used to really bug me about, things that I used to do, because I've always been cautious, and in fact, even in some conditions, afraid of the power that the universe would give me. If I saw something very strongly, or, I had a certain opinion about something, even if I said something bad about someone, things would happen, and Sandy says, you just don't understand the power of the universe that you have because of your connection to it. And of course, that's my main message. I hope that people understand, which I'm sure they will, is that, the universe is there. It's a beautiful universe. If you look, the whole thing about positive thinking is what it's all about. You connect yourself, there's two ways you can connect yourself besides just being positive, but that's with music and with math, because those are the only two things in this world that are absolute. A musical note or a mathematical note, whatever, those are absolute. But just, believe in yourself, be positive, you'll have a great life. I wanted to make one mention too here in ending is about the Shasta people themselves and the Karuk people. They've, of course, the Karuk have established a organization now and have a very active community in the Wairika and Siskiyou County Happy Camp area. The Shasta people are pretty well dispersed. Not the numbers aren't nearly as large as they used to be. But the one thing about Indian people is, of course, goes back to the basic thinking, and that is that, we were put here by WEKA to care for the earth. We were charged when we were created to be caregivers, to protect the earth, to believe in Father, Son, and Mother Earth, to respect our elders, to not harm others, and not to do bad things or dishonest things, which unfortunately the world could use a lot more of that kind of thinking. The main thing about Indian people in my mind, and certainly that I've experienced, is a couple things, and one of the main things is humor. Whenever there's a bad condition or a difficult situation, or just generally, Indian people will find some humor in a condition and try to deal with it in that way, because there is a undying belief that there is hope, and hope is what keeps people going, even through the adversity and the horrible history of what's happened to our people, in the past. But the key thing now is that to look forward in the future and do what we can. Think positive. Keep hope, laugh, pray, eat. Just recognize the universe.
I'm so glad you're with us today, Fred. I can't thank you enough. And we're not going to let him go, though. We've got a online event coming up probably around Thanksgiving. The Best of Mt Shasta. We actually started the Best of Mt Shasta. When I moved up here, I didn't know anybody. And yet I had come up every year for about 20 years just to explore the area, and somehow never connected with the local people. And when I moved up here and began to start meeting the local people, I thought, wow, there's something going on up here that's not happening elsewhere. And when I started to give the conference, the Best of Mt Shasta Conference and Festival, was in 2008, my best friend from grammar school who lives in Redding, she said, you can't have a conference without including the indigenous people. So it began with the indigenous people, and every year they always opened the conference with drumming. Charlie Tom was live at that time, of the Karuk elder, and he had the Earth Circle drumming group, and that's how it's always been. Well, this year, instead of doing the normal Best of Mt Shasta Conference and Festival that has native healing, spirit and spirituality, health and wellness, and our environment as the topics for the local people to give workshops on, This year, we're going to honor the elders that live in the Mt Shasta area. That includes all of Siskiyou County.
I'm an elder, by the way. So
Yes, and he's that's why I said we're not
I'll be there.
we're not letting Fred go because we're calling him back again in November. The elders are all going to be over 70 years old. It's amazing to me to find a lot of people that just came up. They just, for some reason, came to Mt Shasta. They all say they were called to Mt Shasta. They've been here 25, 30 years ago. They're in their 70s, they're in their 80s, and they have their own spiritual teachings. They have their own spiritual development. It's quite a potpourri of experiences up here. And I think it'll make for a wonderful event, a conference. Thanks, Fred. And what it is the first day is going to have, again, the opening ceremony, and there will be workshops in the morning. Fred will have his workshop of just the indigenous people of the area, or people that represent the indigenous traditions. And then in the afternoon and into the evening, it will be all the elders that are presenters that will be talking about their own spiritual development. And a lot of times people say when they come up here, this person, they gave an amazing workshop, but they didn't talk about themselves. And the stories are really wonderful and delightful and very deep, actually, very profound. Many people are very silent about all of that and have agreed to kind of come forth and talk about that. And then in the evening, we'll have it's a surprise at the moment. But Fred's definitely a part of all of this, so I thank him very much for all that he's given to the Best of Mt Shasta. And again, Fred, thank you so much. Do you want to talk about some books that people can look at that are available?
There's a lot of stuff online that you can look up for the Shasta tribe. Actually, there's three different kind of split up. There's the Shasta tribe, the Shasta nation, and also the Shalitz group up north. But anyhow, it's all have the same thing in mind, and that's trying to get recognized as a group. There's a couple of books here. The Historical Society in WEKA produces the Siskiyou Pioneer once a year, and I'm vice president, or used to be. But in years 1971 and 1966, there are some really good articles and write-ups about, my family actually, and some of the history of other tribes, especially the 71 edition. It talks about the different tribes in Siskiyou County. And I encourage you, if you're interested, probably read them online or whatever. So.
I'd like to go back to this again, because talking about that yellow jacket that was on your arm, did you notice he kept wiggling on this little stand we had for him and didn't stay here stationary the whole time? What's that all about?
That is weird. The kind of thing that goes on here, amazing. Yeah.
Well, I think it has a lot of thanks to you, Fred, for this, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Any last words you want to say?
Actually, Hayehwatha, which is Karuk for thank you very much. So,
We'll see you next time. Thanks again.
thank you.